Hello everyone and welcome to Lab 3. Here in Lab 3 we'll review the VLOOKUP function, we'll talk about converting data to tables, and we'll talk about pivot tables. So before we jump into all that, I just want to make sure that we are all on the same page when it comes to knowing that this is an entire workbook, titled Excel Lab 3A, and then the worksheets are along the bottom. Data 1, Data 2, Sheet 3. The way that I was able to change the formatting and change these names, and they used to say Sheet 1, Sheet 2, is if you right-click on any of the names, you can rename. So I can change the names. I can just click rename and start typing, and I can change the name. I can change the tab color here, and I can go through the different colors if I want to change the different tab colors. Another thing I can do is I can protect sheets. I can insert new sheets. I can delete a sheet. Be very careful if you delete a sheet, because if you delete a sheet, that cannot be undone. So then the sheet is gone and cannot be retrieved again unless you've saved it previously under a different file. Sometimes I'll even move a sheet into a brand new workbook. So if you just say move and say go to a new book, this sheet will literally be taken out of this workbook and put in a new one. It'll no longer be in this workbook. But if you say create a copy, it'll make a photocopy of this sheet, and then you can put it in a new book. So it'll still stay here in this workbook, but it will also be in the new book. I'm going to cancel out. That was just a little quick lesson on some issues with your worksheet. So something else is you can move worksheets. If I choose the worksheet and get the little paper symbol and drag, and again, don't do any of these things. This is just a quick lesson. I don't want you to move your sheets around. Because of the auto grading, I want everything to be the same. You can duplicate sheets. If I hold down to get my paper again and then press Control, I get a little plus. You see the little plus that's on the paper? That'll create a duplicate sheet. Oh, didn't do it. Let me put it back. Must have done it too fast. So choose Control. There we go. Drop it. There we go. This is the second Data 1 sheet. It's just a duplicate of Data 1. And often the reason you would want to do that is because if you have this data set and you don't want to make mistakes in this data set, you could work here. And that way you have an original copy that you're not working in, so that you don't change your original copy and lose the original information. I'm going to go ahead and delete this sheet because I don't need it. And it beeps at you because that cannot be undone if you delete it, but that's okay. Now, let's start with where you would start. So one of the first things you might want to do when you look at a data set is notice in this data set, this is transaction information, bank account information, is you'd want to make sure that all of the columns are contiguous. There's no hidden columns. So I have column A, B, C, and D. Nothing is hidden. And columns can be hidden. I can select column B and I can hide the column. And now column B is gone. And if I don't look closely, I don't even know there's a column B. I can get it back by double clicking here. So there is a column B here, just as worksheets can be hidden. I can right click and I can hide a worksheet as well. I'm not going to want to do that here. But the idea is we cannot have our columns, we don't want to have any breaks in columns. We don't want to have a break in a column. We don't want to have a break in a row. So if I have a break in a row, because then if I'm in here and I do my shift control right and down, I'm not going to be able to select all my data. Or if I do control A, which is another way to select, I'm not selecting all my data. So you want to make sure, and again, this is nothing you have to do. This is just to show you. You haven't had anything to do yet, but just listen, that this is the data set with no breaks in columns or rows. Once you have that, you can then look at your data. The next thing you should do is see if there's any formulas that you don't want. Now, how do you know if there's formulas? Well, the way to know if there's formulas in your data is to go ahead and while we're here, anywhere on our worksheet, we're going to press Control and then tilde. Tilde is next to the number 1 key on your keyboard. It is the squiggly line that is above the apostrophe, look, or above the accent key, often above the tab key on the left-hand side of your keyboard. So if I press Control tilde, I can see that I definitely do have some formulas. I have one here in row in cell A16, one in cell A19. I don't want any formulas because if I start reordering my data, the formulas are going to mess things up. So here's what we're going to do. I don't want these formulas. I just want the dates. And you might be saying to yourself, wait a minute, dates? These aren't dates. That's a number, 42,371. Well, plus control tilde again, and you'll see it is a date. It's January 2nd. If I go to my home key, I can see it's formatted as a date. It's January 2nd, 2016. Well, control tilde again, and you'll see that that's how Excel counts time. Excel thinks time began in January 1st of 1900, and I can prove it to you. Put January 1st, 1900 in, control tilde, day 1. Excel was born. Put January 2nd, 1900 in, day 2. Now we go back to what we had, January 2nd, 2016. And January 2nd, 2016 is 42,371 days after January 1st, 1900. So that's just the way Excel counts time. So make sure you also have January 1st, 2016 here. Let's shift control down. Let's copy, control C. And then what we want to do is we don't want to copy formulas because that'll keep our formulas. We want to right click and we want to choose copy values. Copy values will overwrite any formulas and just put the values in those cells. So put copy values. Make sure you do that. So now that when you control tilde, you should see that you have just numbers in all your date fields. Good. We have just numbers. We don't have any formulas in our categories because these are all text, of course. We don't have any formulas in our sum amounts. We don't have any formulas in our category numbers. That's good. Now, there will be some times that we'll want formulas depending on the data set, but in this particular one, we don't want any. So control tilde, and we should be all set. What you should have is you should have January 2nd, 2016 at quick fill for $55.88, ending at February 26th, a donation of $50. Okay, well, the next step that you want to proceed with is we want to populate these categories. Category 1 is auto gas. This should say auto gas, but I don't want it to go through all of these. Category 7 is extra miscellaneous. Category 12 is restaurants. I want it to auto populate. So let's go to categories and copy, go to cell E2 and enter to paste. And now we're going to need our VLOOKUP because this is a vertical lookup. We're going to use VLOOKUP instead of lookup because we're going to use the false command. Because when we see a 1, we want it exactly to go to 1. When we see 3, it goes exactly to 3. No need for the true command. It's the false command, in which case we must use that VLOOKUP. We're not doing a horizontal lookup. We're doing a vertical lookup. The value we would like to look up is in cell D2, comma, choose your array, G2 to H15. Don't forget to fixate that. Go ahead and anchor it with your F4 key. So you should have the dollar signs, comma. Now for the column index number, we don't always enter numbers, but predominantly we do. So in here we want the second column. So I'm going to hit a 2 for the second column, and we want that exact match, that false command. And parenthesis, enter. As long as I don't have any breaks in my data, when I double click in the bottom right corner, it should populate and I see all my categories. I could do a quick sanity check, a smart check to be sure 6 is donate. Yes, it is. 11 is phone. Yes, it is. Things look good. So if I were to change auto gas to just gas, the first category and all others would change to gas. I'm going to undo that, Control Z. You should have auto gas as well. Make sure you still have auto gas. So this is what yours should look like. And now if you control tilde, you'll see that you do have formulas. You have your VLOOKUP formulas. So control tilde to bring us back. I like to keep things uniform, so I'm going to shift control down, and I am going to format this. You don't have to, but with all borders. And it's just me. So now, what if I wanted to summarize this? How would I summarize to know how much I've spent in each category? Well, to know how much I've spent in each category, the best way to do this is with a pivot table. So to insert a pivot table, I can be anywhere in my data set here. I have to be in the data set though. I'm not going to go over here and try to insert a pivot table, because if I do insert pivot table, it doesn't know where to look for it. But if I go inside my data set and I say to insert a pivot table, then it will automatically see the dancing ants, grab cells A1 to E67. So it knows that it's working with the table range I have, so we're good there. And then I have to tell it what to do. But I want to show you a shortcut to getting this menu. So rather than going up to insert and then down to pivot table, shortcuts are quicker ways to move them with your mouse. So if you press the Alt key on a PC, it will pull up the letters that are used to get quickly into other menus. So now if I press the N key, N is in never, I'm in the insert menu. Now if I press the V key, and I'm not clicking this V, I'm actually pressing the V on the keyboard. So Alt-NV is my quick shortcut to bringing up a pivot table. So again, if I just click in my data set here, and the only reason I click inside my data set is because when I press Alt-N and then V, or Alt-NV and hold them all down together, it then sees that this is my data set. I'm in the worksheet data 1. Yes, I am in data 1. The little exclamation point there just tells me that's a name of a worksheet. So the exclamation point means the name of the worksheet is data 1, and you want the cells A1 to E67. Okay, now I want to place the pivot table in my existing worksheet, and this is important because you have to place it in the same spot in order to get full credit. Now, when you choose existing worksheet, you have to put your cursor in this white box, and you heard me click it, that says location, so that you see your cursor flashing. If you don't, it is going to override your table range, and that's a pain, but it's something Excel does. It's a limitation of Excel. So go ahead and click in the location box and now choose cell J2. Make sure you choose J2. And you'll see again the name of the worksheet. The exclamation point means it's the name of the worksheet. Data 1, cell J2, okay. Here's our pivot table. When we create a pivot table, we want what we put in the row categories will be along the horizontal axis. So what of a graph? So I want to summarize my different categories. So put it in the rows. I want to summarize my different categories. And what I want to know is how much I've spent in each category. So I'm going to take the amount spent and put it in sum of values. Now notice it defaults to the sum. The reason it defaults to the sum is because the amount field is all numerical values. If for some reason we had chosen categories again, it would count them. I paid for gas 6 times from January 2nd to February 26th. Car insurance I paid twice, most likely in January and February. Car repairs I hypothetically 4 times. Donated 8 times. Food 8 times. The reason it says count is because the categories are qualitative values. They're text values, so it just counts them. It's a frequency. So if you have text values, it will automatically count. If you have number values, it'll automatically sum. Now, alternatively, you could change that by hitting this drop-down menu, going to Value Field Settings, and you could find the average or the max or the min. I could take the average amount spent, and you can see on average how much was spent over the 2-month time frame. I don't want average. I don't want max, but I can show you. Here's the maximum amount spent over the course of 2 months. Let's put it back to sum. And we're going to change the title up here. So just click in cell K2 and put total spent. There we go. So now you should have total spent in cell K2. J2 says row labels. And we have our different categories, which let's see, they're in alpha order, I believe, but we can make sure. Drop down, sort A to Z. Looks good. Okay, now the idea is we have this pivot table, everything's working great, but what if I have new information to add? Well, now look at data 2. Data 2 all of a sudden has my March information to add. If I just bring this March information over, and add it to the bottom of my data table, it will not update my pivot table. I can promise you it won't. It will not update my pivot table because this pivot table was created, if you remember the dancing ants, it was created from A2 to A67. So even if I copy paste and put my data here, it will not update. Even if I then go up to my pivot table and refresh, it still won't update. What I need to do is, the best kept secret is to turn your data set into a table. To do that makes it dynamic. So anywhere inside your data set, again, as long as you have no breaks in columns or rows, press Control or on a Mac Command T. T as in table, and that will bring up your create table. Alternatively, you could insert a table, and that would bring up create table. It's just a shortcut, Control T, Command T. Where is the data for your table? Yes, it's A1 to E67. Now this is very important. Make sure you have the box checked that says my table has headers. Every time you create a table, ladies and gentlemen, you should have column names. I don't care if they're random, like X, XX, XXX. It doesn't matter what they are labeled, but you just want to make sure you have column headers. So say OK. And now that we have a table, the beauty of a table is that we can take and we can order the table in any way. We now have all these filters. We can order the table, we can alpha order the different categories as you see here. We can sort by largest to smallest amount spent. We can sort our categories, and obviously this would sort these values as well. We can sort by date. Now, when you sort by newest to oldest, you get different dates in here, then you didn't do the first step that I did in this lab. You're going to want to start over, where I did the copy and paste the values. Because remember, we don't want to have formulas here. You probably still have your formulas. So to know if you did that right, when you sort newest to oldest, you should see these dates as the first two that appear. Let's go ahead and undo that. Let's sort oldest to newest. So if you sort oldest to newest, your first value is a quick fill for 5588, and that's auto gas. And your last value, shift control down, is listed as Wegmans 226 for 152.84, and that's the food category. Now what it did is it sorted, because the last sort I did was on date, and then it does alpha order after the date. Okay, so that's really not a big deal if that's not exactly the same, but that was just a checkpoint. So now that this is a table, this is the beautiful part. Other things we can do is we can just look at certain areas within the table. I can just select the ATM withdrawals, just look at those, and there they are. That's where they were. They were in row 4, row 16, row 27, 32, 36, and 44. You see how the values that are skipped, because it's just showing me the ATM withdrawals, which is why this looks like it's changed, but it hasn't. I can select everything again. But the beautiful part is, if I now go to my data 2, and I simply start in cell A2, do not start in cell A1. Start with your data, not your headers. Start with your data in cell A2. Shift control right and down so that you have selected only from A2 to D38. Copy, Control C. Your dancing ants tell you you're in the copy mode. Go back to data, watch this. Go to the bottom of your data set. You should be in cell A68. Hit enter, and everything updates. Everything updates to the point that the VLOOKUP even updated. Now let me check. Do I have formulas in here? Let's Control tilde to make sure that I even only have values pasted for my dates. Looks great. Control tilde. Now watch. Remember what you had? 284.50 for auto gas. You had 561 for insurance, 644 for car repair, 3,000 for house. Now I've added to the end of the data set, and I can right click, refresh, the values automatically update. That would not work, ladies and gentlemen, if I had just brought the data over without first converting my original data to a table. I did not convert this to a table. There was no need. but I had to convert the original data to a table. And now I can continually update my table as data gets entered. All I have to do is go back to my pivot table and remember to refresh, and my data will update. So now let's fix this up a little bit. And how I want you to end this up is, this is amount spent. So let's format. Let's go to total spent, click in total spent, right click. Let me show you how to number format. Go ahead and currency. 2 decimal places is okay here because the pennies will matter for personal financing here. So what this looks good, this is what you should have. If you were to choose accounting, let's see what that looks like. Say okay. Yeah, let's choose accounting. The dollar signs look better justified. So make sure when you right click, you number format, make sure you choose accounting with your 2 decimal places. Say okay. So now you should have exactly what I have. Now this is great, but this just shows me the total spent. What if I wanted to know how much I spent in January, how much in February, if I wanted to compare those values? Well, I could take the date and I could put it in the filter category. Now watch what happens. I put it in the filter category, it automatically moved my pivot table down. But it now allows me to look at different dates, but those dates there are not grouped, are they? I wanted to see January, February, March, etc. I have just a bunch of dates. Now let's cancel that. Let's take the data out of the filter category, the date out of the filter category. Now you can see your pivot table has moved down and starts in J3, but that's fine. Yours should have too. So make sure yours did the same. What if, while we're in our pivot table, what if we insert a slicer? Take the date, say okay. We still have all these dates. What are we going to do? Well, let's delete that slicer. Let's backspace. I want these dates to come in as months. Here's what you're going to do. Go into your categories. Alt-NV brings up another pivot table. So now it says, now notice we have a table. So now it says, hey, you have a whole table there, and that is what we have, is a table, so you're good. Existing worksheet. Let's make the location, we're going to delete this eventually, so go ahead and make the location O, the letter O, 3. So it should say O3. Say okay. We have another pivot table. Let's take our date and put it in the rows category. Now here, it categorized them. January, February, March. Excel knew to group them together for us. And look what it did. It added a field called months to my pivot table fields. So now if I go over to my first pivot table, I don't have months though. Well, that's okay. Here's what we're going to do. We're going to work off of this pivot table. So what I'd like you to do, and I had you put this, don't forget you put this in O3. I'm going to have you take columns N, M, L, K, and J, and just delete these. Just delete J through N. Delete. So now your pivot table is still in J3. It moved down, remember, when we added the filter. So our pivot table's in J3. We have January, February, March. Take those months and put it up in the filters. Take out the dates. Let's look what we have up here. January, February, March, April, May, June. Okay, let's leave that. Let's take our amounts and put it in the sum of values. Let's take our categories and put it in the rows. Go ahead and format again. Number format, we chose accounting. Looks good. Now, could I choose just January? Here's my spending in January. Could I choose just February? Here's my spending in February. What if I wanted to see multiple items, both January and February? There's my spending in the first 2 months. Now this is great, looks good, it's workable, but could I make it more user-friendly? Always think of the end user. Let's take the months and move it out of the filters, but we still have it now here in our pivot table fields. Now what's very important right now is that your pivot table is also now in cell J3. That's where it starts. Make sure your pivot table runs from J3 to K18. And your dollar amounts are going to be the same as mine. All right, well, here's what we can do to make this more user-friendly from the end user. Instead of having the filters up top, watch this. While you're in your pivot table, go to Insert and go to the Slicer. We're going to go to Slicer, and now we have this category for months. We're going to say OK. Now we have this, now think touch screen, which would be super cool. We have this slicer. I would like you to put your slicer, put the top corner right here in M3. M is in man 3. So right here in M3. Now we have the slicer where if I were to choose January, here's my spending in January. February, here's my spending in February. March, here's my spending in March. If I click these little check marks here, I can select more than one at a time. I can select January, February, and March. April, May, June, etc., July, and August are showing lightly because that data doesn't exist yet. So I can clear out everything I've selected, and clear will automatically select everything that can be selected. And now I can unselect. Now here's the thing, do I need April, May, June, July, August? No, let's pick January, February, and March. Can I get rid of these so I can only show the values that are needed? Well, let's see. Click the word months so you can select your slicer. Go to options for your slicer options. We could change the number of columns, but I'm going to leave this a 1. And what we want to do here is we don't want it to show, I just wanted to show you that here we could change the number of options. We don't want it to show values that are not in the slicer. So let's right click. So on your slicer, right click, go to slicer settings, and in slicer settings, click hide items with no data. Now here on a Mac, I don't know if that's there, to be honest with you. But I know on a PC it is because you can see it on mine. So click OK. Look at that. And then we can format our slicer so that now, I'm going to leave it here in cell M3. Now I can look at, unselect everything. What's my spending in January? What's my spending in February? What's my spending in March? Now watch this. Now from here, go ahead and insert your recommended charts. Place your chart, place your chart underneath. And now if we were to pick January, we get the spending in January. February, spending in February. March, no, sorry, I have to click it again. January, now I have the spending in January. Spending in January and February. Oh, why? No, it's doing that. The multi-select chosen. Unselect that. Now, there we go. Just January, just February, just March. Now I have some problems with this chart. The problems with this chart are I don't want the value field settings, so I'm going to hide all value field buttons on the chart. I don't need a legend for only one data series. We're just looking at the total spent. And that changed. Let's go back. Total spent. Remember, we changed our pivot table. Make sure you change that to total spent. Let's go here and say total, spent per month. Let's hit the plus button and go ahead and get rid of the legend and get rid of the grid lines. And now we don't like the slanted axis. So what we can do is choose this axis, and let's just try making it a little smaller, see what happens. Nope, that doesn't work. Keep it a little bigger. I would have to expand my graph. From the right, and it's going to have to go too big. Let's Control Z to undo that. And you know what you can do? Right click, change your chart type, and change it to a bar on its side. That allows your categories to be so that they are not slanted, which are easier to read, and still allows you to see the amount spent. Now, I would likely make this a little larger so I can read my amount spent. I'm going to expand this to U, column U. Now, something else that's cluttering this is the extra zeros here. So choose your horizontal axis, right-click, Format Axis. Go down to your number category, and let's make our decimal places 0. Enter that. Close out of your format. Looking better. Now I can likely make my chart a bit smaller. Yes, looking much better. Total spent per month. You know, something else I might do here is choose my bars, right-click, Format Data Series, and change your gap width. Now, if you go larger, you'll see the bars get thinner. If you go smaller, the bars get wider. I'm going to leave mine off at 62. It doesn't matter exactly where you have yours. But it's obvious to me then I spend the most on my house, and then food, if this, and then the credit cards. In February, what does the spending look like? In January, what does the spending look like? And now you have a filter along with a visual and a pivot table. Now, what I'd like you to do so that the grading can be consistent here, a couple checkpoints. Make sure, again, in your original table, that if you do Control tilde, you don't have any formulas here in column A. If you do, you're going to want to start over again from the beginning of this video. Your only formulas should be in column E with your VLOOKUP formula. And that formula should be, as you see here, for the very first for E2, and then just completed down the rest of the column. You should span, let's go ahead and sort this column A from oldest to newest so that you can see you span from January 2nd, which is quick fill, down to March 31st, which is tops market. Yours should be the same. Your pivot table, when refreshed, should show, now here's the thing, I want everybody to choose March. Choose March and only March so that everybody's, when you submit it, ends up showing $202.25 for gas for the automobile and $520 on the student loan, $1,500 in the house. Everybody's should show the same. It should be in number format of accounting with 2 decimal places. Your pivot table corner should be in cell, as you see here, J3. Your filter should be the corner here, should be in cell M3. And your chart spanning from in the corner of M down to the bottom corner of T. And you have changed to total spent per month, the title. You have removed the grid lines, you remove the legend. You make sure that you change your chart to a horizontal bar chart because it's easier to read your labels. And then also make sure you read the 2 extra decimals here that we don't need. And again, remember, we just right-clicked, we did Format Axes, we went to Number, and we made decimal places a 0. The last part was that we chose our bars, and we made the gap width about 62. And what happens then is we have a pivot table that's able to be updated. As data is updated, we would simply refresh our pivot table so we can add April, we can add May, we can add June. And because we have our table, our data converted to a table, when we go to our pivot table and hit refresh, it'll automatically refresh our table. Our slicers will add April, May, June, etc. And then our chart will update as well, depending on whatever month we choose. Again, leaving off, make sure you have March chosen. Make sure you have your pivot table, the beginning of your table started in cell J3. Okay, I hope you learned some good lessons about pivot tables and charts and the cool feature of a slicer. There's so much more I could show you on pivot tables that if you take MGQ 408, you would learn more about pivot tables. So tune in. We will do more lessons in Excel. We still have a couple more Excel lessons this semester. If you have any questions, again, don't forget, email mgq301@buffalo.edu. And as always, don't be afraid to email me. I'm more than happy to help you out. All right, guys, this one was a little quicker, just over 35 minutes. Again, I can't stress enough to just make sure that you follow the same steps that I followed because of the auto grading process. Please, any questions, let us know. Have a great day.